Morning. We are going to be beginning a brand new sermon series this morning for the next 4, 5, maybe 6 weeks. We'll see where it goes. This one, every year we have a special October sermon series, and I know many of you look forward to these different sermon series. I actually have one person, not to name names, but they said, "Oh my gosh, I started coming to Awaken because of your monster series 2 years ago," as we looked at some of the classic monster movies. Well, this morning, our sermon series, it's called Stranger Things of Scripture. And over the next couple of weeks, what I want to do, and Sammy's going to help me with this one, is I want to look at some of the oddest, weirdest stories of the Bible. They're there, and sometimes you read these and you don't really know what to do with them, but I feel like all of these stories that we're going to look at over the next couple of weeks, they're perfect for October and the season that we find ourselves in. We're going to start with this one, and honestly, I was talking to Sammy probably about this series about maybe like a year or so ago. We started mapping out, okay, here's the different stories that we want to cover in this series. So this one's been about a year in the making, and right from the beginning, I always knew that I wanted to start with this one, because for me, this story, like, where do you even begin? As we'll see here in a moment, where do you even begin with this story? Because I think this is the oddest, weirdest story that you will find in the Bible, maybe the most eerie story that you'll find in the Bible as well. And I've titled this one, "What Happened at Endor?" And as I've said, it's the oddest story. I think, at least in the Bible. I mean, the Bible has quite a few odd stories. You read them and you're just like, okay, you sort of dismiss it and move on to the next thing that you actually understand. You ever come across those stories in the Bible before? You're like, what in the world am I reading? All right, let's put that one to the side and let's kind of move on to the next one. Well, here's one of the ones that has kind of baffled me. And the more I studied and sat with this story, the more I realized this one, it is probably, I mean, there are tragic stories all throughout the Bible. This is like up at the top 5 tragic stories that you will find in the Bible. And let's begin with some of the major players in this story that we will get to here in a moment. We have King Saul. So we're staying in the Old Testament. We've been talking about Solomon for a bit. We're going to go even further back in the history to King Saul, who happens to be the very first king of Israel. This story takes place at the very end of his reign. He was anointed king, became king. Things were kind of going okay in the beginning, and then he just started tanking. Things started not really going so well. He started moving not only his own life, but all Israel in a direction that really wasn't a good direction, wasn't a God-pleasing direction. So we have King Saul, and then we have the prophet Samuel. And Samuel, one of the first prophets, and he was the main spokesperson for God during Saul's reign. You have prophets all throughout the reign of the kings, and all these prophets, they would have been speaking for God with a particular message, whether it be to a king or to the people of Israel. And the prophet that we will come across in this story is Samuel. And Samuel, he's a very interesting prophet. He anointed Saul as king. Then he anointed David as king while Saul was still reigning. And essentially, at one point in Saul's reign, he told Saul, hey, listen up. Things aren't going well for you. God's not too happy with you. Your reign is about to end. The kingdom will be ripped from you, and it will be passed on to someone else. One of your arch rivals will be passed on to David. Samuel has already had this conversation with Saul. Saul knows his reign's at its end. And we will pick up the story here in 1 Samuel chapter 28, verse 3. I think that this is like a prologue for the story. It kind of sets the entire story up right here in this verse. Samuel was dead. The way I liken this, you know, in Star Wars where they have that the crawl, the beginning, like crawler, whatever they call it there, right in the beginning, as the music opens up, you see Star Wars, and then it tells you what's happening, like Luke Skywalker was in hiding or whatever. Here's that opening crawl that we have for this story. Now, Samuel was dead. All Israel had mourned for him and buried him in his own town of Ramah. Saul had expelled the mediums and spiritists from the land. This is the setting that we have for this story. 2 things to note. First, as I mentioned before, Samuel we have to look at Samuel as being the voice of God. In the Old Testament, prophets were the ones who spoke for God. So, what we know in this story is that Samuel represents the voice of God. This is very important for understanding this story. Second, what we know here in this one verse, what we're told is Saul was doing the right thing. He was following the Torah. Things started well for Saul. Here's what we find in Deuteronomy. The nations, this is before Israel moved into the land, God telling the Israelites, here is how I want you to set up your society. Here are some of the things that I want you to do. Here's how I want you to be as a people. The nations that you will dispossess, listen to those who practice sorcery or divination. But as for you, the Lord your God has not permitted you to do so. The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among you. All these other nations, they had spiritists, they had prophets, they had mediums, they were doing sorcery. That's not for you. There will be a different way for you to hear from God. All the nations think they hear from God this way by doing this, but I want you to boycott those practices in your society because I will provide for you something else. The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among you, from your fellow Israelites. You must listen to him. This is what you asked of the Lord your God at Horeb on the day of the assembly when you said, let us not hear the voice of the Lord our God. It is too powerful. It's too mighty. It is too fear-inducing, nor see this great fire anymore, or we will die. So God provides a prophet. Saul, what we're told here right in the beginning of the story, has banned all the spiritists from the land. That is the opening scenario for the story, which then raises a few questions like, okay, well, if Samuel's dead and we don't have our spiritists, we don't have our mediums, we can't do sorcery, how will we hear from God? Who is going to replace the great Samuel? If we don't have a prophet anymore to hear God's voice, to hear God's direction for how we are to lead and conduct ourselves, well, how will we ever hear from God? The story continues here, verse 4. The Philistines assembled and came and set up camp at Shunem, while Saul gathered all Israel and set up camp at Gilboa. When Saul saw the Philistine army, he was afraid. Terror filled his heart. He inquired of the Lord, but the Lord was silent. The Lord didn't provide answers by dreams or Urim or prophets. Saul was afraid. Here's a map of the situation. We see this red line right here, the Philistine army. They travel all the way up here. They camp right here at Shunem. And then you have Saul and his army right here, Mount Gilboa, and the two of them are about to face off. Philistines, Israelites, they were enemies at this time in the story. There is about to be a major battle. Saul is the leader, he's the king, and he's filled with some fear. Of course, you're about to go into battle. He's about to lead his men into this fight, and he's filled with fear, and he wants to hear from God. Well, what do I do? Do I attack? Do I pull back? Like, what do I do, God? But God was silent. You ever been there before? You say a prayer. You have some questions. You need some guidance, some direction. You're filled with some fear. You pray. You ask God for some wisdom, and it's just radio silence. This is the situation. He's about to enter into this monumental event, and he's asking God for wisdom, and there is absolutely nothing. So he's on the eve of the battle, and remember what I said earlier, because this is important, the prophet Samuel had foretold the end of his kingship. So Saul, he's always wondering, is this the end? Is this going to be when the kingdom is ripped from me? He's going into this giant battle. I'm sure, knowing what Samuel had already prophesied, he's thinking, okay, is this the end of my reign? Is everything going to be even further downhill from here? God's gone radio silent. And the thing about King Saul at this point in the story, he has become more and more mentally unstable. What you see in his reign is he's doing all right in the beginning, but as things continue, he becomes more and more unhinged. So at this point, the guy has pretty much lost his mind. A few adjectives to describe Saul's state of mind. He's desperate. He's in anguish. He feels alone. God's silent. God is not responding. He feels abandoned, directionless, afraid, and hopeless. I have a picture for us to describe what this looks like. There's your picture. Darkness, staring down into an abyss. Yeah, we've all had these moments of desperation, of anguish, feeling alone, as if there's no guiding presence with us. This is where Saul is. So where does Saul then turn in his desperation? Saul then said to his attendants, "Find me a woman who is a medium, so I may go and inquire of her." Well, there's one in Endor, they said. Wait, hold on a second here. Like what? Hadn't Saul banned all the mediums and spiritists? Like you're reading this, just a couple of verses later, we're told Saul had banned all of them from the land, and now he's like, "Hey, go find me a medium." And they're like, "Hey, there happens to be one." I don't have a map here. I have another map in a moment. But you'll notice Endor happens to be right around the corner from where him and his army are camped out. Very convenient that there's a medium right. He banned all of them from the land, and now he's like telling his men, hey, listen, I need to do something else here. Everything that I've known how to do, like it's not working. Can you please find me a medium so I can go and ask her some questions? Oh, here's the map. Yes, Endor right up here. So he's right here, little trek to Endor. Saul disguised himself, putting on other clothes. At night, he and two men went to the woman. "Consult a spirit for me," he said, "and bring up for me the one I name." But the woman said to him, "Surely you know what Saul has done. He's cut off the mediums and spiritists from the land. Why have you set a trap for my life to bring about my death?" She's afraid. She's been practicing in hiding. She's making sure that no one else notices her, of course. I mean, this story, it's tragic and it's comedic at the same time. When you start reading it, because there just happens to be a medium right around the corner from where Saul is. He goes, visits her. She was supposed to have been banned from the land. And now she's saying, well, what are you doing to me? Like, what's the deal here? You know where this is going. Like, you're reading this, you know exactly. I mean, right when you read that opening crawler, or whatever you want to call that thing, the prologue, you know exactly where the story is going. Saul swore to her by the Lord, "As surely as the Lord lives, don't worry, you're not going to be punished for this. I'm the king," although he's in disguise. The woman asked, "Whom shall I bring up for you?" "Bring up Samuel," he said. "Bring up the one who I know can speak for God." Here's the thing about this story. It has all sorts of questions. I mean, this story just raises endless questions. Why isn't the medium being condemned? Why is she still in the land? We have all these questions about the story, but here's the truth. Those are just on the edge. The main invitation for this story, and this is, I had to really sit with this one for a couple of days because I was trying to get to the heart of this story. I felt like there were so many things happening in the story, so many places we could have gone, but then after just letting it sit there for a bit, I came to the realization there's one thing at the heart of this story. And we can look at all those other parts of the story, and they're interesting to think about, to question, to reflect on. Maybe we'll get there on Wednesday. But there's one thing that I want you all to see about this story, because the invitation of this story, it's an opportunity for us to reflect on where we turn when life becomes difficult. Because we all have those moments of desperation. We all have those moments of feeling alone. It's part of the human journey. We've all been there before. You get certain news. There's something that happens in life and it just guts you. And you're there on the floor trying to pick up the pieces. God is silent. You're directionless. It's as if there's no hope in the moment. The question for this story, and the question for all of us to reflect on, is where do we turn when life becomes difficult? When we find ourselves desperate and afraid, alone, hopeless, when life looks like this, where do we go? What do we rely on? In the story, there's three things I want us to note. First, Saul is doing that which he has explicitly forbidden others from doing. Ban the mediums. Find me a medium. There's a word for this. It's the word hypocrisy. He's told everyone else, don't do this. And then things get difficult for him. And the very thing that he had led his people not to do, well, now he is engaging in that particular practice. Hypocrisy means a stage actor. Goes back to Greek culture. Someone who is playing a part. Here's the thing about Saul's hypocrisy. His desperation is revealing the true Saul. We can all play a particular role in life. We can all put on a mask. We can all be a stage actor. We can put on the appearance that everything is great. We can put on a very religious and pious appearance, an appearance of success. We might be able to trick others about what's really happening within, but desperation reveals your truest character. This is what is happening in the story with Saul. What is left when all of his power, he knew his reign was coming to an end, his success as a king was ending, all the security that he had known, he had Samuel, who was the voice of God. Now Samuel has gone, and now God has gone silent. So what is left when all of his power, all of his success, all of his security has been stripped away? Think about for each of us. When the things that we rely on are stripped away, what is left? What remains? For Saul, this revealed the true foundation of his life. And that's why this story is so tragic, because it further reveals why the kingdom has been taken from him. This is the true Saul. Not everyone was able to witness and see the true Saul, but we're told in his desperation, it revealed his true character. Number 2, secretive actions are taking place in this story. He wants to go visit this medium. What does he do? He goes at night while his men are sleeping. Not only that, he puts on other clothes. He is trying to disguise his actions. You know you're in trouble when you're sneaking around because you want to hide your actions from others. This is a great truth in life. And I'll just leave it there. Now, the root cause of 1 and 2. Here's the third thing to note. Saul hasn't developed his own inner life. He hasn't developed his own connection with God. So he is forced to rely on Samuel. When God is silent, he has nothing within to turn to because he hasn't developed his own inner life. So in his desperation, he commits this hypocritical act of seeking out a medium so that he can now once again resurrect Samuel and find that person that he has been leaning on all throughout his kingship. And the truth about this is, he does all of this despite having a pretty good idea of where it was going to lead. I don't know whatever possessed him to bring up Samuel, because the last time he saw Samuel, the conversation was, God is ripping the kingdom from you. He turns, walks away, never sees Saul again. The last encounter with Samuel was not a positive one. And yet Saul still relies on Samuel being the voice of God because he himself has not developed his own inner life. Story continues, verse 12. When the woman saw Samuel, she cried out at the top of her voice and said to Saul, "Why have you deceived me? You are Saul." The king said to her, Hey, don't be afraid. What do you see? The woman said, "Well, I see a ghostly figure coming up out of the earth." "Well, what does he look like?" he asked. "Looks like an old man wearing a robe is coming up," she said. Then Saul knew it was Samuel, bowed down, prostrated himself with his face to the ground. Samuel said to Saul, first words of the ghost, "Why have you disturbed me by bringing me up?" He is a grumpy ghost. He sees Saul, like, what's the deal? I was having a great time here. Things were going great. I was happy to be away from you and all the things that happen in the world. Like, what are you doing? Why are you disturbing me? Well, I'm in great distress, Saul said. Philistines, they're fighting against me. God has departed from me. He no longer answers me, either by prophets or by dreams. So I've called on you to tell me what to do. I need your help. Well, Samuel said, why do you consult me? Now that the Lord has departed from you and become your enemy. Like, what do you think I'm going to do for you? The Lord has done what he predicted through me. The Lord has torn the kingdom out of your hands and given it to one of your neighbors, to David, because you didn't obey the Lord or carry out his fierce wrath against the Amalekites. The Lord has done this to you today. The Lord will deliver both Israel and you into the hands of the Philistines. Tomorrow you and your sons will be down here with me. The Lord will also give the army of Israel into the hands of the Philistines. And then Saul throws himself on the ground in even greater distress than he was before. The main invitation for this sermon, where do we turn when life becomes difficult? Let's make it very, very practical for us here this morning. How is it that we build an inner life that can withstand moments of desperation and loss? Because we'll all be there. We'll all be there at some point in our lives. So how then do we build that inner life? How do we build that connection with God so we have something to stand on in those moments of abandonment and loss and desperation? Well, let's look at some wisdom from Jesus. At Awaken, our mission is to create followers of Jesus. I think looking at the wisdom of Jesus is a great place to go when asking the question of how do we build our own inner life. Jesus, he spoke about hypocrites quite a bit in the Gospels. One particular place where he spoke about hypocrites was in his great Sermon on the Mount. And he offers two practices which I want to invite you this week to put into practice. Either one or both of them. I think these are two extremely helpful practices to develop so that we can grow and have a buoyant inner life within in those moments of desperation. The first practice is prayer. Matthew 6. When you pray, Jesus talking to all those who have gathered to listen to him speak. When you pray, don't be like the hypocrites. For they love to pray, standing in the synagogues, on the street corners, to be seen by others. The hypocrites love to let others know how often they pray, how flowery their prayers are. But when you pray, don't keep on babbling like pagans. Like when you pray, don't talk too much. Essentially, that's what he's saying here. For they think that they'll be heard because of their many words. Prayer isn't about packing as many words as you can get in whatever allotted time you might have. Don't be like them. Your Father knows what you need before you even ask him. There's a lot of silence that goes into prayer. Times of listening. Not just running your mouth and talking and asking. I mean, what is it that Saul wanted? He wanted to hear. Well, how can you hear when you keep on talking? So the invitation, the practice of prayer that Jesus invites his disciples into, it actually includes quite a bit of silence. Don't keep on babbling. Your Father, God knows the things that you pray. Okay, use some words, of course, but then listen. This also requires solitude. Being by yourself for a time. Finding a room, maybe going for a drive, turning all the music down, going for a walk, not having your headphones in. The invitation to prayer is one of silence and solitude. And then Jesus does give a template for prayer. This then is how you should pray. And we've talked about this prayer before. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread. Forgive us our debts as we also have forgiven our debtors. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. Here's the template of prayer. You start with gratitude. What are the things that you're thankful for? Sometimes we call this praise. We start our service here at Awaken with praise, being grateful for the God that has given life and grace to each of us. So we start with words of gratitude. And sometimes you have to sit in silence because it takes a little bit. Okay, what are the things that I'm grateful for? And some days that's really easy, and other days that's really hard. So sometimes it takes some silence to be aware, to recognize the gifts that you have received. Then it moves to this connectedness. Notice it's our Father, all of us together. Prayer is meant to connect us with God, but then also connect us with every other person and realize, hey, it's all of us connected together. When we forget our connectedness to humanity, that's when things really begin to go off track. So prayer, there's gratitude, there's connectedness to all people, there's some introspection. Confession, forgive us our debts. Is there any sin that I'm carrying within? And I need to change my path. Again, it takes silence to be aware of what you're carrying within you. And then to offer others forgiveness, which is a really, really difficult practice. This is why prayer, it's an intentional, continual practice. Is there anything within me, and I need to take a step here in the direction of forgiveness, possibly, as I realize my connectedness with others. And then in this prayer, there's an opportunity to reflect on the path that we are walking. Lead us not into temptation. What's the road that I'm walking right now? Is it a good road? Is it leading me in a good direction? Or do I need to turn and begin pursuing a different path? So then how do we build this strong, buoyant inner life? Prayer, silence, solitude, and follow the template that Jesus offers here. Here's the second way to build your inner life: fasting. When you fast, don't look somber as there's our word of the morning, hypocrites do, for they disfigure their faces to show others they are fasting. Fasting, yes, food. We can definitely fast from food, but fasting means to go without, to deny yourself. It can be food. It can be something else. It can be your phone. It can be entertainment, whatever it happens to be. You deny yourself and you decide what it is, all so that you can hear from God. Our culture is a culture that has not cultivated the ability to sit with discomfort. So the uncomfortable emotions like pain, uncertainty, or even boredom. I mean, think about Saul. He's desperate. Well, what does he do? He goes and leans on Samuel. He has nothing here within him. He can't sit in that desperation. I realized here's something that happened while I was writing this sermon. I was at my desk writing this sermon. I happened to have my phone just a couple of inches away from me because I was expecting a phone call. I don't like writing sermons with my phone because I don't like being interrupted. I hit a point when I was writing this sermon where I didn't know where to take it. So I was thinking about it for a bit. I was pausing. I was working on a slide. And then I'm like, okay, where do I want to go with it? Well, in my, call it boredom, desperation, uncertainty, whatever it was, what do you think I did? I reached for my phone. And I started laughing because I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is what I'm talking about here in the sermon. And here I am reaching for the phone. Whenever something uncomfortable arises, how often do you reach for your phone? Whenever there's an uncomfortable emotion, rather than just sit with it and ask, well, what is this teaching me? Is there any wisdom that God is? We grab our phones and we start scrolling. And the next thing you know, you're like 20 minutes later, you're like, oops, all right, time to make dinner. The thing about our phones, I mean, they give us 24/7 access to everything. And honestly, that's not a good thing. It's really not a good thing. Because there's moments when we need to deny ourselves. We need to fast. We need to be silent. We need to listen. But now you can just scroll endlessly, doom scroll. You can go shopping and buy whatever you happen to want. That's not a good thing also, because we have this uncomfortable emotion, and now how do we fill that emotion? Well, we go and buy a pair of shoes. Or we go shopping on Amazon's Prime special day thing, and you feel a little bit better, but the emotion really is still there and you haven't processed it. Or you haven't explored it for its wisdom. Or you can go to any restaurant you want. Supermarkets open 24/7. This is a modern phenomenon where you can actually go to the food store, and at 11 o'clock p.m. you can buy a tub of ice cream, a head of broccoli. It's never happened in human history before. I guess unless you have a garden, then you can go cut a head of cauliflower or whatever is growing back there. But the fact that we have 24/7 access to everything, it is not the best for us, because it allows us to set those uncomfortable emotions aside and not have to actually deal with them. So how do you grow an inner life? Prayer, silent solitude, fasting, going without. I will not use my phone for these hours of the day. I will not use my phone for my Sabbath. I have a digital Sabbath, whatever it happens to be. I will not turn the television on. I will not turn the radio on when I go in the car, because I'm just going to sit and I'm going to listen for the next 20 minutes while I'm driving to work. Are there opportunities for you to fast during this week so that you can listen and that you can sit with some of those uncomfortable emotions or feelings that are there that you typically push aside by just reaching for that which is available to you all the time? If we can't sit with our discomfort, we will return to the familiar, even when we know where that road will lead. Think about Saul. He couldn't be present to his desperation. So he returned to the familiar, Samuel, despite knowing what that would produce. He knew what Samuel had spoken to him. Was he really expecting Samuel to say anything different? But yet he returned to the familiar because it felt good. Even though he knew it wouldn't produce the result that he truly wanted, he went back to the familiar. Aren't we all the same? We return to the familiar despite knowing it's not going to truly produce the outcome that we desire for our lives. Maybe another question for us is, what or who is your Samuel? Your familiar. And you need to set that aside and find a new practice, a new way to sit with those emotions. For our story, the first story of Stranger Things of Scripture, Saul and the medium at Endor, the question for us, or the invitation rather, is to develop an inner life, a connection with God that will sustain you through every situation you face. This week, take some time. Prayer, silent solitude, follow that template, and deny yourself, fast, something for whatever block of time you designate.